Welcome to Leadcast. Today I talked to John Nisabimana. John has an amazing story, and I want to get right to the point. John is going to inspire you to be a better person, more positive person, and to look at setbacks in a different way. If he has any sort of the impact on you that he had on me. So let's go listen to what John had to say. So it was great to run into you yesterday. I met you in person for the first time. I just recognized you because I had seen your photo before on your email. And I was like, hey, it's John, right? We were just passing each other in front of the Empress. And so it was good to meet you yesterday. It's good to have you here today.
Thank you very much. I thought that was great, actually, for you to recognize me. So I don't know. It's interesting because when I'm walking to work, I just go.
Yeah.
But
me too. I'm kind of, when I walk to work, I have my headphones in. I'm kind of in my own little world, listening to music or podcasts or whatever. So thanks for coming. So John, what's your current role in the BC Public Service?
I am currently policy analyst in the Indigenous Justice Strategy Secretariat, and this is in the Justice Services branch at the Ministry of Lieutenant General. I have been actually in this role for 6 months so far. And previously, I was at the Ministry of Citizen Services as Senior Freedom of Information Analyst. And I did mention earlier today as we were working in that I actually started my career in the BC government at the Ministry of Children and Family, and I was in substay. So it's good that I'm actually here talking to you. So, but outside the government, I'm also the UNICEF ambassador for Canada. Or I would say I am also the UNICEF Canada ambassador, to be precise. And I was appointed in 2008 by Nigel Fisher, who is from British Columbia, actually, and Nigel was the president, the chief executive officer, the president and chief executive officer of the United Nations Children's Fund in the Canadian office, and also the deputy special representative of the United Nations Secretary General at the time. I have been part of United Nations family for 11 years, so far in the former capacity as UNICEF ambassador. And as you may know, United Nations has offices in Toronto and with our headquarters in both New York and Geneva.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember before we had you, when we were having discussions about you coming in and doing the podcast, you said, well, wait a minute, I need to check with my boss at the UN. So I was emailing with someone from the UN, and I felt like I was dealing with a celebrity.
Well, I am not I don't know if I'm a celebrity, but I just happen to be by default, at least I can say. Having, I guess, my appointment is set that way that everything is arranged through Asia, New York, Geneva, or our colleagues in Toronto. So
yeah,
it's good. We have a team. I have a desk office in Toronto, even though I'm never there. But we have a team there that it coordinates all of my public affairs engagement with the UN. So so I am really fascinated by your. I don't know all the details of your story and all the details of your work with the UN, but I have read a little bit about you, and I'm wondering if you can share for those that don't know your story. Can you tell me a bit about where you grew up and? Basically, I don't have actually my story is very sad, and if you remember back in 1994, Rwanda had a genocide, and at that time I was 7 years old, and And as a child at the age of 7 years old, I had my young brother who was 5 years old. So we end up basically in all the killings, and it's very sad. We end up basically having to find ourselves running for safety, of our lives. In the process, my brother and I ended up in a refugee camp in Uganda, and how we got there, I don't know. But all I can remember is basically running, hiding in the bush day and night, and here, and we found ourselves in a refugee camp. Did I know what it means to be a refugee or who a refugee was? Not really. But that's that's my story, and life in a refugee camp was very, very tough. It's hard. I can never wish any friend of mine to live in a refugee camp. It's a very hard life, and actually hopeless. You live in a limbo life. Personal lives, confused every day because you don't know what your future is going to look like. There is no food, shelter, no water, especially when there is a war happening. And so as kids, my brother and I actually have one another brother of mine who was 1 year old. So I grew up taking care of two young brothers in a refugee camp. And but in the refugee camp, earlier we were talking about UNICEF. I was one of, I guess, among many other children, and that's how we were looked after as kids. So my first school, like going to school, elementary school, it wasn't like any class here. I started going to school in sitting under the tree, and so but that's how things were, and finally, I end up leaving the refugee camp later to basically, and I will be getting that, telling you more about that. But that's my story, really. I don't have. It's just very sad, but it's good, and I'm happy to be alive.
So you were in the refugee camp from the time when you were 7, you said?
Correct, yeah. And I spent pretty much half of my life living in a refugee camp. And when I say living in a refugee camp, people, there are no houses. We lived pretty much in the bush until the humanitarian agencies show up and give people tents. And so when I came to Canada, it was my first time to live in the house.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And so when you were talking about UNICEF, like the charity UNICEF, right? They were the ones that were providing schooling and some support for in the refugee camp. Is that right? They were the ones that taught the kids and stuff like that?
In situations of emergence, as you know, Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda actually claimed 1 million people.
Yeah.
And so having found myself running and surviving from there too, I lost my family in the whole thing. And so, but for children who manage to find themselves in displaced places like refugee camp, so what basically part of the mandate for UNICEF is mandated by the United Nations General Assembly to protect children. So they respond, and so did I know who actually people were you just as a kid at that age, I'm used to wake up and living in the house with people, but now you are in the bush and everybody's crying and people are dying because of hunger. There is no food, and so but the UN responds to ensure people are protected, and so there usually many humanitarian agencies coordinated under the United Nations umbrella. Yeah.
And I guess this is where my ignorance is showing a bit is obviously you and your brothers, 2 younger brothers, right?
Yeah, correct.
you escaped some terrible stuff. You survived. You made it to the refugee camp, and in my mind, okay, you're in the refugee camp. You're safe, but you're saying. It sounds like things were so disorganized, and there was no. Even though you're in the refugee camp, there's no food, there's
no water,
no
there's
basic,
nothing, no medicine, nothing. But if I can speak now as an adult, and now of course I'm a spokesperson for because I've been able to travel now in my capacity at the field missions, especially to see how the UN is coordinating responses to current conflict areas. So what happens in a situation like that, basically it takes time to mobilize resources. For UNICEF, our supply division is in Denmark, Copenhagen, for example. But because and again here I'm speaking as of what I know now, not what I knew at the age of 7.
Of course,
because at 7, you basically. You were hopeless. I was hopeless. I didn't think or believe that anybody cared about me. And so, well, I learned later as I grew up and starting questions, why are we in a refugee camp? These camps are very, crowded. So many people and so many kids. Kids, you see somebody today, tomorrow they are dead. You survive the genocide, but the situation is in the camp killing more people, even the same or equivalent to the same people that actually are dying in the crossfire shooting. So a lot of kids I knew, I would see them today, tomorrow they are gone. Do I know where they're gone? No, because there are so many things. Like one is there is no food. Second, there is no medicine. So people actually get diarrhea, cholera, those kind of things kill, especially children. So a lot of kids that I met died. Luckily, nothing happened to me. So, but
and your brothers, thanks to you,
yeah,
I'm sure they were able to survive.
My brothers got sick, but when you are a child, and what happens, and this is where humanitarian agencies or UNICEF and the United Nations come in, so they usually train social workers to work with especially kids who are in camp, and I was in that category, kids who don't have parents. So a day in the morning, there is probably somebody boiling porridge, and then we line up to get that porridge. You miss it, you have nowhere else to go. So, because we were young, but those are the kind of things that I lived on, and it's interesting to see how things have, it feels like a long time ago, but not really a long time ago. So I have only had a good life for only a few years in my life. So.
Yeah. And you ended up coming to Canada about 11 years ago, is that right?
Yeah, well, I was explaining, so when I was in the camp, it's when as things start together, and this is how where UNICEF comes in. I grew up in UNICEF programs, my first time of going to school, getting school supplies, pencils or pens, or even school uniforms, those kind of things. And then, so we moved from sitting under the tree to sitting in the UN tents as bunch of kids, hundreds, and then learning. So I basically attended school in a refugee camp, settlements you may call it. And so in 2004, that's when my journey actually took a profound and sudden, turn to Victoria here, Canada. And the reason for that is because I was given a scholarship to come to Lester B. Pearson College, and Pearson College is here in Victoria, British Columbia, actually my chosen. So at Pearson College, we have 200 students each year. Those are students that are selected each year. We have 5 houses, and I had I had one roommate from British Columbia, Vancouver, and I had another one from Peru, and then another one from Czech Republic. So we have there are 4 roommates in each room. So I had 3 others, including me. So as you may know, Pearson College was inspired by the former Prime Minister of Canada, Lester B. Pearson, and Lester B. Pearson is also the Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he won the Nobel Prize for his work to actually helping create the first United Nations peacekeeping force. And in his lecture for his Nobel, he posed a question, and I am going to repeat the same question. And the question was, he asked, how can there be peace without people understanding each other? And how can this be if they don't know each other? So as graduates of Pearson College, we honor his words through everything we do today, through our actions. And today, Pearson College is one of 18 United World Colleges, actually, schools worldwide. And then going back, to my story as a child, in a refugee camp who had spent the majority of my life there. When I heard that I was coming to Canada to attend, Pearson College, given the life circumstance, everything is so hopeless in the camp, and I could never believe that I was, you're telling me that I'm going to Canada? No way. So I couldn't believe it. And
what did you think about Canada at that time? What were your ideas about Canada? Like what?
We used to play games as kids, and when you play games and then we assign countries, I always picked Canada. I just knew Canada, but I didn't know much about Canada. But I know Canada is a peaceful country. That's all I could know in my mind, because there is these kind of games we used to play as kids, and then everybody picks in a country. And so I used to be Canada. But anyway, so that was good. But arriving on campus, I remember actually the Canadians in Kampala in Uganda, accompanying me to, they put me on the plane. And so I got on the plane, and I couldn't believe that what was happening, that this is happening, I'm going to Canada. So it was my first time to be on the plane, and you can imagine how that feels, especially for the confused refugee kid. I've never been to town. When you hear refugee camps are like actually in the bush. You don't have means to go anywhere because you don't belong to anywhere. So, but after arriving on campus here at Pearson College, my life changed, completely, and things have never been the same. So, like I was saying, I lived in a refugee camp. I went to school in the refugee camp. I did everything in a refugee camp. Really sad, and for many years. But coming to Pearson College here in Victoria was such a different experience than what I was used to. And so you ask me getting here, like my first time to see snow, for example, like I saw the snow was planted, at the college, on campus, there was so much food, like you actually have a choice to decide what to eat and not, breakfast. I never had that in a refugee camp. So many things. After graduating from International Baccalaureate at Pearson College,
what did you study
at Pearson College? We are International Baccalaureate, basically school, so it's called IB. But yeah, so after finishing Pearson College, I went to UVic, University of Victoria, and from University of Victoria, I got a Bachelor of Arts in Child and Youth Care. And you can understand why would I want to study children's rights or children's issues. One is, my background. Growing as a kid in the camp, I never understood my own rights. So I wanted to understand all those things that I never had somebody explain to me, or even that affected me. So I then went back to the University of Victoria and completed a Masters of Public Administration, and that was in 2014. So, and
I'm doing that right now, Masters of Public Admin.
Yeah, welcome. So we can talk about that for sure and how it feels to be an MP. It's a good program. I hope you're finding it
Okay,
really.
good.
Yeah. So and I just want to add, like, just like Pearson, maybe for the purpose of this, my experience at the University of Victoria were also transformative, and so in a different way, of course, given my own. Where I'm coming from, but I hope you will basically find the program, rewarding as I did find it. So we can talk more about this maybe later. So
yeah, what about the experience at UVic? Studying at UVic was transformative for you. What about it was?
Well, one is it's. It's so much to say. One, I was explaining my situation. I never thought that one day I can, would ever go to school and actually go to university. So, different people have different, experience. But if I reflect back as a kid growing up in a refugee camp and, no means on, even though I was going to primary school, at least those basic areas that UNICEF provided me, helped me to go to school. But you think about universities and where you're going to go, and actually you're talking about a university in Canada. So to me, being at UVic was very special. The School of Public Administration, also the School of Child and Youth Care program as well. These are very specialized programs, and so I feel personally that I left UVic equipped with the skills I needed to go and apply somewhere else, which I actually get to do and have been able to use in my work everywhere I've been. So,
yeah, it sounds like it really, like you were saying when you were in before you came to Canada, you didn't really imagine that you were going to go to university, whatever, and then you were able to do that and get the skills and then get a great job. Like it sounds like it was university did for you what it's supposed to do for people,
yeah,
I guess.
And yes, for sure. And I made lots of good friends in the university as well. I had, my professors helped me, guided me, and I still go back to my professors for guidance even now. So it was very special for me. I think to me, the university, just like Pearson is my home, for me, UVic is my home too. So in that regard, yeah.
And I'm just remembering something, I don't know if it was your bio or what, but you left Victoria after studying for a while, or at some point, right? Can you tell me about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Sorry, I'm making you talk so much. You have to drink water.
Good. I did go... I did leave Victoria, and when... But before I tell you how I left Victoria, I want to tell you, how things actually got me interested in things that I get to do now. Because, when I was on campus at Pearson College, there was this time when we had to do a class exercise, and I remember, my classmates and myself, I wrote a letter to myself that I wanted to see when I come back for the 10-year reunion. And this is how things, I'm basically trying to give you a story how things have changed for me. And in the letter, I just stated to myself that when I come back, I will be working for United Nations, particularly UNICEF. And the reason I'm saying this is because this leads into the question you're asking, why I left Victoria. So, and I said in the letter to myself, that when I come back for reunion, I would be working for the UN, United Nations, and here, UNICEF, standing behind, their mission to make a world, a place fit for children. So again, this goes back to, as you know, as a child growing up in camps and things starting to change. But in my second year at the University of Victoria, that's when my dreams started to unfold. I received a letter, actually, a formal letter from UNICEF. To be basically, it was a request. If I wanted, I would accept their, to be their regional youth representative. And it took me 3 days to respond because I didn't know what that meant. And in fact, I had to ask my professor to read the email and say, "Oh, this is a good thing." And I wrote back after 3 days, "Yes, I accept," and it's I'm honored for this. So.
So you got the email and you're trying to figure out what does this actually mean?
Yeah, because that's
right.
After first year, second
I don't
year,
know what that
as
means.
a teen,
Yeah.
it's like, okay. So, and it was actually in the refugee camp that I was saying, I grew up in UNICEF programs, going to school, receiving their emergency, supply and school, materials and so on. And so, but that's when I got to see, their work in action through them helping me and so many other kids. But then I discovered that actually, children's had rights and this is something that was completely unknown to me. So I also learned that there is a global of community, of people that it really cares about me personally, as a child and my well-being and my future. And so with this, I felt, a deep of responsibility. And this is, on campus, I'm reflecting about my life and everything I've seen. And then I feel, as a young leader, I've got to do something about it, and I still feel it the same way as we speak now. The opportunity to help United Nations, for example, to achieve their development goals, and this includes promoting children's rights, and as you know, this is a core UNICEF mandate, because UNICEF is basically mandated by the General Assembly of United Nations to protect children. So with all this, I and I wanted to really make sure, to go back to the same area where I grew up and give back to refugee camps. So I wanted to do something because I've had a really complicated life, and I wanted to do something and to help in any way I can. But this was a value that was instilled in me while I was a student at Pearson College, and thanks to Canadians, support and UNICEF, I am able to be here and speak to you today. So it's very interesting because we really meet each other through work meetings and committees, but this is my story. This is how things changed for me. And if I may, as I want to say that as an agent of United Nations, speaking, from UNICEF, we have a special status in the countries where we deliver programs, and this really helps UNICEF to do more to help children. This means it means that we all of UNICEF initiatives are scalable, and many are adopted by host governments, which in the end helps to create a large multiplier effect of to donor for their dollars and this happens as governments invest more in support of services for children. I also wanted to say, our unique ability to work effectively with, as organizations, local and international partners, You mentioned how earlier the question you asked me how, you know, what happened when a refugee camp and organization, who was it UNICEF? There were so many, but there are local organizations, there is also international organizations, and so because of our partners, this allows UNICEF to work in the countries those organizations cannot actually access. We are the largest data, collector of data, especially on children, and what this basically makes us be the global expert on anything that really concerning challenges and solutions to help improve the situation of children and their well-being globally. I also wanted to say that we are in the countries. UNICEF is in the countries for a long time, either right from when disasters or emergencies or wars erupt, during and even after all this is over. So, and this therefore makes UNICEF ability to mobilize quickly and also achieve the impact second to none. Mm-hmm. And so, with all of this, I left UNICEF. I mean, not Victoria. That's the question that I wanted to go this way because I want to come. Yeah. So, why did I leave Victoria? So I left Victoria, as already mentioned. In a few minutes ago, that one of my goals when I was a student at Pearson College was to work for UNICEF, United Nations, particularly in UNICEF. And so I left Victoria for the first time to work at the UNICEF country office in Malawi, in child protection.
In where? Sorry?
In Malawi. Malawi's country is very actually bordered with Mozambique and Zambia in Southern Africa. So I was in UNICEF Child Protection there, and then moved to New York at United Nations headquarters, where I also worked in both United Nations Development Program, UNDP, in the Bureau for Policy and Program Support, and then moved back to UNICEF headquarters again in Child Protection Division. And having said about my dreams and things that I wanted, so I can say that I was successful in achieving my dream goal. And then in 2015, I returned to Victoria to join the BC government.
I feel like despite your young age, you've done a lot more than a lot of people do in their lives. No, I'm serious because
thank you.
You're so accomplished and positive, and it seems to me like you're just getting started. Is that how you feel too?
Yeah, thank you and for your kind words. And I can say, I've been, I guess that I've had opportunities. I can say, UNICEF has really given me opportunity to travel in missions and yes, I always got to ask those kind of questions. Here, you've got somebody, who is heading the delegation, and then they see somebody young like me. But I get asked those kind of questions, and it's kind of interesting. But here's what I wanted to say. I wanted to add, that everything we've been able to do in terms of responding, it's been made possible by Canadian contribution to UNICEF, and it really helps us to reach children in these circumstances, we have seen tremendous advances, but the world remains a dangerous place and unnecessary place for children to be, for a child to be. And I have seen in my field trips with the UN, and but also even in what you know through the news and so on, you can agree with me that we have more regions now that are in conflict, today than during any other time in 30 years. And so today, as I speak to you, 1 in 4 children live in countries affected by conflict or disaster. With Central African Republic to Syria, children have become frontline targets by warring parties, and this is unacceptable. And this is why this year, 2019, UNICEF has launched a global appeal for $3.9 billion US dollars. And this is our largest ever, to provide life-saving emergency assistance to 41 million children. And these 41 million children are affected in 59 countries living through humanitarian disasters. And
so that's how much has been raised, 3.9 billion?
That's the appeal that we, UNICEF has put forward for this year, 2019, to respond to this current situation.
So that's the need?
Yeah. But I wanted to say that Canadian support, I'm happy to say that Canadian support to UNICEF, again, as I already said, it's making it possible for us, UNICEF to reach these children, and we are making incredible improvements already as we speak in the lives of these children. And my hope, what I'm hoping, is that we can continue to work together to find solutions to help children, provide education, just like I was provided access to, to go to camp. And as an important service, and to make sure that every child is given a second chance. So
that's amazing. And you, like I mentioned before, and given the things you've been talking about, you are very accomplished in your young life already. And one of the and it's not just me saying that. There's a lot of other people that have recognized that as well. And I know you were awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal, which basically honors significant achievements made by Canadians, right? Can you tell me about how you got nominated for that, or how that worked?
Thank you. Actually, I was one of 6 Canadians presented with the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. And this was at a special ceremony actually at the United Nations headquarters, New York, on March 2013. As you recall, the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal was created in 2012 to mark the 60th anniversary of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, accession to the throne as the Queen of Canada. And I received the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for all my work with UNICEF. And the Ambassador of Canada to United Nations awarded the medal, and I was very humbled by the recognition.
Wow, that's were you in New York at the time working there, or did you travel for that?
Oh,
you were already there
in New York at the UN. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And New York is a crazy city, right?
I like New York so much. It's New York is great.
I've never been. I have 2 really close friends that have been working there for a while, and they're trying to get me to visit them. I've never been to New York before. I really want to go.
I think you should go. It's a good city. You will love it. You will love New York. So,
well, I'll have to check it out then. So, given your work with UNICEF and the and United Nations and your role with them, it seems like you've been public speaking. Like you get opportunities to do public speaking and address crowds. And before we turned on the mics, you were actually, I usually give guests a little lesson on how to use the mics. And I remember you saying, "Oh yeah, no, I've done this before. I wore the headphones at CBC and I did this." So I know, I know you're an accomplished speaker and presenter. And so do you have any? And this is totally selfish. I'm just trying to. Do you have any tips for me?
Well, thank you. Well, actually, I don't do much public speaking with my current job here at the Ministry of Lieutenant General. But yes, for sure, outside government in the United Nations, I do this, and this is part of my work with UNICEF. And being the spokesperson, and being the spokesperson has given me really an opportunity to thank Canadians and on behalf of UNICEF for their contributions. Honestly, my speeches are official speeches of UNICEF, and they do come from our communication team. But here's what I found that works for me, and hopefully this. You will find this helpful for you and maybe everyone else too. So
you have the first thing is you have people that write your speeches for you.
Correct.
So that's what I need to get. Someone to write my speeches for me.
Okay. Then you're going to come to UNICEF, okay? The province won't let you go though. So, no. So what I would say, here's my tip, basically, know your audience, practice. I find being myself really helps me, and have fun, and also I took public speaking course at university, so I don't know if that would be worth exploring for sure. And I usually ask for feedback from my supervisors. I attend an event and meet people, but at the end of the day, I get debriefings and then I get feedback on what I did and what I can do better. So I would recommend taking a public speaking course or seeking feedback.
Do you get nervous still when you do a speech?
Yeah, but normally when I show up at an event, I have the chief of communication, the chief of policy, so I kind of get nervous in this second, but this is especially if I'm on official duty of UN. So, but I do have people around me and that eases things, But to avoid being nervous, I usually show up early and get familiar with the stage before when it's still empty, nobody's there. Check the microphone so that it's comfortable with me. So all those things help ease things. I do get nervous, and when I'm nervous, I speak so fast. So, but I will have somebody in the audience when I speak nervous who will give me a sign, and then I can slow down.
Yeah. Sign language.
But if I may speak actually to British Columbians, I wanted to, with everything we said and how I got into this speaking, I want them, British Columbians, I want them to know that in Canada in particular, as UNICEF, we are the face of UNICEF in Canada, and I've had opportunities to connect with Canadians across, this country of ours, discussing the impact that UNICEF has on or makes, for children who are caught in a conflict, children like I was, and so Canadian support has helped UNICEF to work with the government of Afghanistan to vaccinate more than 7 million children each year against polio. And as a result of this and many other efforts, Afghanistan has had a reduction, a decrease in actually, a 62% decrease in the number of polio cases reported in just 1 year. And we've had a drop of 80% since 2011. And this is just one example. Canada is the biggest government donor to UNICEF's polio program and in Afghanistan. And this is really helping to bring the country closer to complete polio eradication. So.
just to, if I may just refocus and ask you about, we've talked a bit about, and thanks for those public speaking tips, that's helpful. And someone else actually told me a similar tip about going to the actual stage, like the day before or a couple hours before, and just standing in the spot, just so you're not disoriented when you get up there. So I think that's a good piece of advice. I want to ask about your a bit about your role with the BC government now, and you're with the Ministry of Attorney General. And can you just explain briefly what you do there, what your role is, and what you do there?
Yeah, so I am working in Indigenous Justice Strategy Secretariat here at the Ministry of Attorney General, as you said, and I said it from the beginning. So I'm a policy analyst there, and it's a very exciting to be there, especially the provincial work on the rights of Indigenous peoples. We are getting to do some ground breaking work that will help make a difference for British Columbians. And as I already said, with my background in public administration, I am excited to be part of this and this work and make a contribution.
And so as a policy, and how long have you, because you were at the Ministry of Children and Family Development, then Citizen Services, now Attorney General. So how long did you spend at each ministry?
So I was, when I left New York, I briefly came to Ministry of Children and Family. I was there probably less than a year, and then moved to Freedom of Information at Ministry of, and by then Freedom of Information was in the Ministry of Finance, and now is the new government. Then we were housed in the Ministry of Citizen Services. But I spent, I've only been in the BC government for 4 years. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this current role for about two years then?
Just 6 months.
Just 6 months.
Yeah.
Oh, just
So,
6 months.
Yeah.
How are you finding it?
It's great. Like I said, it's very exciting, and I'm happy to be part of the team, and hope to contribute to what is being done there.
What are you excited about for in your work right now? You mentioned a little bit about working on the Secretariat and improving things for British Columbians and Indigenous people in particular. Can you talk a bit more about what?
I am excited just for the same reason I just said, because the Indigenous Justice Strategy Secretariat is a very new division branch in the Lieutenant General's office, and so there is so much work happening at the provincial level, especially with the recent introduction of UNDRIP, UN declaration, like the province moving to passing Bill C-41. So I think that's really exciting to see everything that is being done on the rights of Indigenous people. So I am excited to be part of this team and looking forward to hopefully be useful and supportive to what the province hopes to do to help these communities. So.
You seem, that was such a positive answer, and you seem like such an optimistic person. You're smiling at me as I'm saying this.
Yes, I am, in fact, and yes, yeah.
Yeah. Are you ultimately optimistic about the future of the BC Public Service?
Yes, I am, and as you know, public service is critical to citizens, and I believe that it will always be the case. As I already explained earlier, the BC Public Service is already doing lots of great work for the public, and I'm honored to be part of it.
So if I could just ask about a bit more about your optimism, do you do things to stay positive or optimistic, or are you just naturally a positive person, or what's the deal?
Well, that's a good question. I am a very positive person, and I don't know. I just happen to be that way. I believe, that you know but I can be positive. But if you look at the work we're doing, the steps we're taking as a province on behalf of the citizens, it's very, exciting. And so there is me being, positive, but also there is so much work that is being done or planned that is very exciting. So it's good to look forward to, as part of the team, to making that happen, or have an opportunity to make that happen. And so, yeah.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to. Sorry, you want to add something?
I want to say,
can tell.
I know that when I was, getting ready to come, there was, I guess, back and forth based on the questions, what advice I would give to new public servants, that want to.
Oh yeah, I didn't ask you that.
So I wanted to, move that the positive side, and me being pessimistic. Part of it is basically what I probably would say. That's what makes me proud to actually be in a BC public service. And I wanted to say this especially to new people that are, joining the public service. And if I could give advice, this is what I would say. My advice basically would be open-minded, take every learning opportunity that comes your way. Yeah. And always remember that it's a privilege to have the opportunity to work in the public service and to contribute to the positive changes for British Columbians. I also would say take time to get to know your colleagues and laugh, with them. We tend to get so busy in our cubicles and people with offices, and so it's important to really get to know your colleagues and laugh with them. And I also wanted to add, hold the the public service, your ministry mission, dear, and believe in what you do, what you're doing, and always remember that you are making a difference no matter what level of positions you are in. Public servant means to serve, and that's who I am in the United Nations, whether in the United Nations or in the BC government. And this is why, personally, the BC Public Service is a good place to be. And, the public service has attractive opportunities, and I think you will agree with me that we are the best public service in the world. so it's true. Yes. So, we can talk about the BC public service, offering, flexibility. This has personally helped me to call out my duties with UNICEF, and it's very important. This is very important to me. My supervisors and so many senior leadership roles have always been willing to help me, and I find the senior leadership has been great, helping me to grow in my roles and as a person. And so my message to new public servants, please take advantage of these opportunities in your ministries. Career development, as you and I know, is very important to the BC Public Service. Work with your supervisors and senior leaders to continue that. And finally, if I may, mentors can play an important role in our lives and careers. Try to find mentors who can help you become the best version of yourself. So.
How I just want to ask a follow-up question about mentors, because people that are new to the public service, or maybe for whatever reason they may not know how to get started with finding a mentor. Can you say, based on your experience, how to find a mentor? Like, how do you find them? Where are they?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And for me, like, a good starting point would be to have a conversation with your supervisor. Say, I'm interested in this. Is there somebody, in the ministry that you could be teamed with, or they could introduce you to, and so that's a starting point. I also find, like, we do have, for example, the policy community practice, and I happen to be part of that. And you're always going to be meeting lots of colleagues from different ministries, and so you probably will find somebody you admire, and through colleagues you talk to, but all I can say is that our senior leaders and we always make time to meet somebody, especially to offer career advice and help you grow in your career.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, thanks for your comments. I just want to jump back to something that I didn't want to interrupt you, but you mentioned it being a privilege to work in the BC Public Service. I totally agree, and I think that sometimes I can get negative sometimes, or have complaints. I know other people may sometimes get distracted and not be able to have that kind of positive mindset you have all the time. But I think it is important to realize that even though things are not always perfect, and not everyone, always has the same opportunities, and we need to work on that. The fact that you are a public servant, that is a privilege. That is
certainly,
and there are many. From a lot of different angles, if you look at how many people are applying for BC Public Service jobs, if you've made it in, how many people want to work for the BC Public Service. And like you said, at all levels, it really is, my experience is it's been a good employer, and it is really a privilege to work here.
Great. I agree with you. And now this goes back, basically it's up to us to take advantage of all these opportunities provided to us and make and use them, basically. Yeah. So that's what I would encourage to new public servants. So.
Yeah. Thanks so much, John. I just want to thank you for spending the time coming in and talking to me. I want to thank you for your positivity, your energy from the time I met you the other day to when you came in and we were trying to figure out how to buzz into the building. You've had a smile on your face the whole time. And you really do have an infectious, positive energy.
I don't know what to say about that. Thank you.
So thanks for coming in, and hopefully you'll come back another time too if we ask you.
Thank you very much again for having me. So it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks. That was my conversation with John Nisibimana. I expect you were inspired by his story just like I was. And he gave me a lot to think about that I'm still thinking about now. If you're interested in following along for more of Leadcast, you can join the At Work group site. And I think that's all I have to say.